class? We're about to start lesson 4 from chapter 6, quadratic equations. Now, it tells us here that a quadratic equation contains a squared variable, for example, x squared minus 3x equals 4. One way to solve quadratic equations is by factoring. This is the simplest method and the one you should use on the GED mathematical reasoning test. When you factor an expression, you find the terms that divide evenly into the expression. It says example 1, factor expression, 15x squared plus 9x. Look for a term that divides evenly into both 15x squared and 9x. Both terms can be divided by 3x. Factor out 3x, write the terms as factors. So as you see here, we divide 15x squared by 3x, that gave us 5x. Then we divided 9x by 3x, and that gave us 3. So when we factor this out, what we divided each term by is 3x goes outside the parentheses, and inside the parentheses we have 5x plus 3. Now we'll go more in detail with that a little later. It says study example 2 to learn how to multiply factors with more than one term. Okay, now we have went over this already, so we're going to skip down here so we could do some of these problems. So let's start off with problem number 1. It says multiply. Problem number 1, we have x plus 4 times x plus 2. Now, what we're supposed to do, we have a binomial times a binomial. We're supposed to multiply, do the distributive property of the first term and the distributive property of the second term, which I had taught you all, we call it FOIL in this instance. So what we would do, we would take the front, which is x times x, times the outer, plus x times 2, plus the inner, plus 4 times x, plus the last, which is 4 times 2. So we have front, outer, inner, last, our FOIL method. So x times x is x squared, x times 2 is 2x, 4 times x is 4x, and 4 times 2 is 8. So now we have x squared, 2x and 4x is 6x, plus 8. And this right here is our final answer. Now, we're going to move on. Let's go to problem number 4. Yes, problem number 4. For problem number 4, we have x minus 6 and x minus 3. We still use the FOIL method. So we have the front, which is x times x. We have outer, which is a positive x times negative 3. We have the inner, which is negative 6 times 3. And then we have the last, which is negative 6 times negative 3. X times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is a minus 3x. Negative 6 times x is a negative 6x. And negative 6 times negative 3 is a positive 18. So now we have x squared, negative 3x minus 6x is a minus 9x, plus 18. And that is our final answer. Okay, now, I'm going to move on to some of these other problems. Let's look at problem number 6. Problem number 6. We have 2x plus 1 times x minus 2. All right, so this is a binomial times a binomial, so we still do the FOIL method. So we will add 2x times x, which is the front, and then the outer, we add 2x times a negative 2. We add an inner, plus 1 times x, and we add a last, plus 1 times negative 2. So this will give us 2x squared. 2x times a negative 2 is a negative 4x. 1 times x is 1x, or you could just put x, either one is fine. And 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Now we combine like terms. We had 2x squared, negative 4x plus 1x is a negative 3x, and we bring down our minus 2. And that is our final answer. Okay, next. Let's see. We've done quite a few problems. Let's go with problem number 10. Yeah, problem number 10 looks good. All right, with problem number 10, we have 3x plus 8 times x plus 2. 3x plus 8 times x plus 2. Now we still do our FOIL. We add a front, 3 times x. The outer, it'll be 3x times 2. The inner, which would be 8 times x. And then the last, which would be 8 times 2. Okay, now, 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 2 is 6x. 8 times x is 8x. And 8 times 2 is 16. So we add 3x squared, 6x and 8x is 14x plus 16. And that is our answer for problem number 10. Now we basically taken care of the top portion. It's basically more of the same. Now what we're going to deal with is factoring. Now there are a few rules to factoring that we have to go over. Okay, the first rule of factoring, just like I told you all in class, is that you must look at all of the terms and see whether or not they have anything in common besides positive 1. If they do, you're supposed to factor out those terms first. Then after you do that, you're going to have to do the factorization of a trinomial. So let's go and take a look at problem 16. Hold on, I need to change this a little bit. Yeah, that's good. Okay, now problem 16. We have x squared plus 4x plus 3. All right, now we look here, and all three of these terms, the x squared, the 4x, and the 3, all of them only have positive 1 in common. So that means we have to go into our factoring mode. Now listen, I'm going to, with problem 16, I'm going to do a lot more with 16 than I do with the other problems because I'm showing you how to start this problem. So first of all, this trinomial in its basic form is written as ax squared plus bx plus c. So that means the coefficient of x squared is a, the coefficient of x is b, and then you add your constant. Now we look here, the coefficient of x squared is 1. So we'll write a equals 1. The coefficient of x is 4, so b would be 4. And then the constant, the value without the variable, which is c, is 3. So now we have our a, b, and c. Now this is what we would do. After you list your a, b, and c, you will multiply a times c. That's your first step. Well, I'm sorry, your second step. Your, well, actually it's the third step. So let me go back through this. First, you have this equation lined up correctly. The variable squared is first. The variable to the first power is second, and then the term without the variable is third. Second, you factor out whatever it is that they may have in common besides positive 1. Third, you list your a, b, and c. And then fourth, you multiply a times c. Now you can rewind this or pause it and go back and start listing them if you need to list them. So a times c is 1 times 3, which is 3. Now, once you multiply your a times c, you have to ask yourself, there's two things you need to know. One, what are two factors that multiply together that would give us what a times c give us, but then added together will give us what b is equal to? So again, we're trying to find two factors that multiply together that give us 3. But those same two factors added will give us 4. So what we need to do is list out the factors of 3. The only factors of 3 are 1 and 3. Now if you look at it, 1 times 3 is 3. But if we add these two factors, 1 plus 3 is also 4. So that means that the two factors we're using are 1 and 3. Now, so that is step 5. Step 5 is to find the factors of A and C that will multiply together that will give you what A times C gave you. And then the same factors added together will give you what B is equal to. Okay, so now we move on. Okay, now what we would do, which would be step 6, is we're going to substitute these two values in for B into the original expression. So let me show you how that's done. The x squared is not affected and the constant of 3 is not affected. But this portion here that involves the B. So what happens is we look at the variable. The variable is x, so that variable will stay x. But the coefficient of x will be breaking up into two values. It'll be 1x and then also 3x. So these two factors here, the ones that you selected, they will become the coefficients of x. You will break x up into two values. And then it'll become the coefficient of the first x, coefficient of the second x. And you see they're added together. Now you have 4 terms instead of 3. Now, again, this is step 6. And if you notice here, 1x plus 3x is still equal to 4x. So technically, you didn't change the problem. Now, step 7. You will group the first two values and group the second two values and factor. Step 7. Group the first two values and then group the second two values and factor. So here with x squared and 1x, both of these have x in common. So you would take x squared divided by x, which will give you x. 1x divided by x, which will give you 1. Next, we come to the second two terms. 3x and 3. They both have a positive 3 in common, so you will put plus 3. 3x divided by 3 leaves you x, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. Now, that was step 7. Step 8, you are to look at the parentheses. If they are the same, you can factor. If they are not the same, then you either factored incorrectly and your problem is over, or you either factor incorrectly, or if you didn't factor incorrectly and the two parentheses are not the same, then that means that it's already factored. And we will get to a problem like that. So here, this would be step 8. Step 8, with the two parentheses that are the same, you factor those two parentheses out, which is x plus 1. And then you will write everything that's outside the parentheses in its own parentheses. So that's step 8. And here you are done. Now, if you need to go back over the steps, you can rewind it and listen to me go over the steps. Or better yet, I may just write them out. Let me write them out. First, step 1. Organize trinomial in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, when I say that, that means organize it with the variable squared first, the variable to the first, and then the constant. That's what that means. Step 2, see if you can factor anything out of the three terms that is not positive 1. So step 1, organize the trinomial in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Now I know that this lesson says polynomials, but we're mainly dealing with trinomials. So you can use those words interchangeably here. Step 2, see if you can factor anything out of the three terms that is not positive 1. Step 3, list the coefficient of A, B, and C. Now just to give you an example, we listed the coefficients of A, B, and C, which is A is the value in front of the variable squared, B is the value in front of x to the first power, and C is the constant. All right, step 4. Multiply A times C. Number 5, find two factors that multiply to give you A times C, but the same two factors added will give you B. Okay, number 6, substitute the factors in for B. Number 7, if you factored correctly, the two parentheses should be the same. If they are not the same, you either factored incorrectly or it was already factored. And number 8, list, well, how about factor out the parenthesis and then put all values outside the parenthesis in a parenthesis. And that's it. You would be done after that. Now again, you can rewind this video and pause it so you can copy this down. Okay, now we're going to move on to another problem. And I am going to follow these steps. Now you're not going to be able to see all of the steps, but you can look on your notes if you copy them down. So the next problem I think I want to do is problem, let me do 18. Okay, 18, we had x squared plus 8x plus 12. Now, if you notice, this is already set up in ax squared plus bx plus c. So that's good. So step 1 is okay. Step 2, we see if we can factor anything out besides positive 1. We cannot. Okay, now we move on to step 3. Step 3, we list a, b, and c. And remember, these are the coefficients of the ax squared plus bx plus c. The coefficient of x squared is 1. The coefficient of x is 8, and c is the constant, which is 12. Now we multiply the a and c, which is number 4. So a is 1 and c is 12. 1 times 12 is 12. Now we go to step 5. Step 5, we try and find the factors that multiply together that will give us 12, but add together give us 8. So we list the factors of 12. The factors of 12, I'm going to write this over to the side, are 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. Now, I would tell you this, to make this easier for yourself, when you list the factors, list the lowest number first, then the higher number. And I will explain to you later why it's important to have a specific order. Okay, now these are all the factors of 12. So we know all of these multiplied is 12, but added together they have to equal 8 here. So 1 plus 12 is 13, 2 plus 6 is 8, and 3 plus 4 is 7. So we know we'll use 2 and 6. So now we go to step 6, which tells us to substitute the factors in for b. So we will have x squared plus, now 2 and 6 replaces the 8. So it'll be 2x plus 6x, and then plus 12. The x squared and the 12 is not affected. So the next thing we would do, we would group the first two values, and we can factor out an x, and we'll be left with x plus 2. We'll group the second two values, which we can factor out a 6, and that will leave us x plus 2. Now, what I notice here, I did not complete step 6, so I'm going to go back and write step 6. But right now, let's finish this problem. This was step 7, where we grouped them, and then we said if we factor correctly, our parentheses should be the same, and they are. So we'll write the x plus 2, and this is step 8. That'll be one parenthesis. And then also with step 8, everything outside the parentheses, the x plus 6, will go in its own parenthesis, and we are done. Now, I have to go back and correct a step we missed. When I said, with step 6, I said substitute the factors in for b. Okay, now, when we do that, we also have to group the first two and group the second two. Then factor. So that's what I forgot for number 6. Substitute the factors in for b. Then we group the first two, I should say terms. We group the first two terms and group the second two terms, then factor. So you could just add that to your number 6. Okay, now, let's go to problem, let's do 19, because we didn't do anything with subtraction yet. So we had x squared minus x minus 6. Now this is lined up according to ax squared plus bx plus c. Even though we see subtraction here, it is set up in that manner. They only have positive 1 in common, so we'll list our A, B, and C. Our A, our coefficient of x squared is 1. Our B, the coefficient of x here is negative 1. And then C, our constant would be negative 6. Now step 4, we'll multiply A and C. A is 1, C is negative 6. And 1 times negative 6 is negative 6. Now, it says find two factors that's multiplied together to give you A times C, but the same two factors added will give you B. Now, if you notice, A times C is negative, but we add 6 here. So we're going to take the factors of 6. Let's disregard the negative for right now. So we have 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Okay, now, we know to multiply together to get a negative number that we have to multiply. One of the numbers has to be negative and one has to be positive. Now, to determine which is which, this is where B will come in. If what you have for B is positive, then that means the smaller numbers would be negative. But if B is negative, that means the larger number would be negative. And since B is negative here, that means that the 6 would be negative and the 3 would be negative. So 1 times negative 6 is negative 6, and 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. But added together, 1 plus a negative 6 is negative 5, and 2 plus a negative 3 is negative 1. So 2 and negative 3 are our two factors that we will use. Okay, now, step 6, we're going to substitute this in for B. So we have x squared. This is a positive 2, so it'll be positive 2x. This is a negative 3, so this will be minus 3x. And we bring down our minus 6. Now we group the first two values. And then we can factor out an x. And we'll be left with x plus 2. We'll group the second two values. Now here's the difference than what we were doing before. The second two values have always been positive. But now the second two values are negative. But we're mainly concentrating on the first of the second two values. If this is negative, whatever you factor out will be negative. So negative 3x and negative 6, we know they have 3 in common, but it'll be a minus 3. And negative 3x divided by negative 3 is x, and negative 6 divided by negative 3 is positive 2. Now our two parentheses match up, so we'll write x plus 2, and then everything that's left on the outside will be x minus 3. And that took care of problem number 19. Now I'm going to skip over to one where we actually have to do some factoring. So let's do 27. And when I say factoring, I'm talking about at the beginning of the problem. So we had 2x squared minus 8x minus 10. Okay, so now, this is in the order. We have ax squared minus or plus bx plus c, even though their subtraction is still in the order. Now we see if we can factor anything. We had 3 terms here, 2x squared, negative 8x, and negative 10. They all have 2 in common. So we can factor out 2, and this will leave x squared minus 4x minus 5. Okay, so now we factor this out. So our next step would be to list our A, B, and C. So we have our A, B, and C. Now A is the coefficient of x squared, which would be 1. B is the coefficient of x, which would be negative 4. And C is the constant, which is negative 5. Now we multiply A times C. A is 1. And C is negative 5. 1 times negative 5 is negative 5. So we take the factors of 5, which is just 1 and 5. So we know in order to get a negative number, one of these has to be negative, and it just so happened that B is negative here, so that means the larger number would be negative. And 1 plus a negative 5 is negative 4. So we will use these two to replace the B portion here. So we'll bring this down. We have 2 times x squared, And then we have plus 1x minus 5x minus 5. Now we group the first two and group the second two. So we still bring down this 2 here. The first two you can factor out of x, and you will be left with x plus 1. The second two you can factor out of minus 5, and you'll be left with x plus 1. Now if you notice, these two parentheses are the same. So we still bring down our 2, and we'll bring out our x plus 1, and then everything on the outside of these parentheses, which would be this x minus 5, and we'll bring down as well. So this right here is your final answer. Okay, now we're going to do one more problem from this exercise here. And I think I want to do problem 26. Problem 26, we had 2x squared plus 5x minus 3. This is in order from ax squared plus bx plus c. So, and they only have a positive 1 that could be factored out. So we'll list our a, b, and c. Excuse me. Our a is 2, our b is 5, and our c is negative 3. So we'll multiply our a and c. A is 2 and c is negative 3. 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. Now we're going to list out our factors of 6. Be 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Now we know that one of these factors have to be negative, but we need to determine which one would be negative, whether it be the larger number or the smaller number. We look here at b is positive, so that means that the lower numbers have to be negative. So when we add negative 1 plus 6, that gives us 5, and negative 2 plus 3 is 1. So we know we'll use the negative 1 and 6, because that gives us what b is equal to. So now we add 2x squared minus 1x plus 6x minus 3, as we take these factors here and substitute them in for the 5x. We group the first two. You can factor out an x, and you add 2x minus 1. We group the second two. You can factor out a positive 2, and you will have, a positive 3, not 2. You can factor out a positive 3, and you add 2x minus 1. The two parentheses match up, so you add 2x minus 1 in one parenthesis, and x plus 3 in the other parenthesis. And we are done. All right, so we're going to move on. Okay, class, we look down here at C. It says choose the one best answer to each question. 31, what are two solutions for the equation x squared minus x equals 20? Okay, now, unlike the other problems we were doing, they were expressions. This right here is an equation. So we still do it basically the same way we did the expression, except for at the end we would need to find the solution. Now remember, originally, I told you all you had to have this as ax squared plus bx plus c. You have to have that in that form. But when you do an equation, you have to add the equal 0. So you must first set this up in this form. So we have to get this to equal 0. So we'll subtract 20 on both sides. So we have x squared minus x minus 20 equals 0. So now this matches this. Now we do this the same way we did the other problems. We see first if we can factor anything out here aside from positive 1. We cannot. So we list our a, b, and c. Our a is 1, our b is negative 1, and our c is negative 20. So now we'll multiply a times c. So we have 1 times negative 20, which would be negative 20. Now we have to take all the factors of 20, which would be 1 times 20, 2 times 10, and then 4 times 5. Those are all the factors of 20. Now, we know that one of these have to be negative. So we look at our b. Our b is negative, so then that means that the larger factors of each one of these would be negative. So now we add them. This will give us negative 19. This will give us negative 8. And this will give us negative 1. So we know we will use 4 and negative 5 as our factors. So now we have x squared plus 4x minus 5x minus 20 is equal to 0. Now we did the 4x and the negative 5x to replace our b value. So we group the first two terms, and we can factor out an x, and we have x plus 4. We group the second two terms. Since this first term of the second two terms is negative, what we factor out must be negative. So we'll factor out a negative 5, and we have x plus 4, and that equals 0. Okay, so now our next step, you see that our two parentheses are the same. So we'll write that down. X plus 4 is in a parenthesis, and then all of the values on the outside is in the second parenthesis, and that equals 0. Now, if we were just doing the expressions like we were doing before, we would be done here. But because this is an equation and we're trying to solve, what we would do is set both parentheses equal to 0 and then solve it. So we have x plus 4 equals 0. So we'll subtract 4 on both sides, and x is negative 4. Then we have x minus 5 equals 0. Add 5 on both sides, and x is 5. So these are the solution. X is negative 4, and x is 5. So our answer here would be A. And if you want to prove this, if you go and substitute these values in, they would both work. So your answer here would be A. Now we go here to B. For 32. For problem 32, it says for which of the following equations is x equals negative 4 a solution? So what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to substitute in negative 4 for x and then solve. Since you all know how to substitute, I'm not going to take you through every problem. So just to let you know, the answer would be D. So I would substitute in for negative 4 for D just to show you that D actually works. So D is 2x squared plus 2x minus 24 equals 0. So we'll substitute in negative 4 as per the directions. So we have 2 times negative 4 squared times 2 times negative 4 minus 24 equals 0. Negative 4 to the second power is positive 16. So that'll be 2 times 16 plus 2 times negative 4 minus 24 equals 0. 2 times 16 is 32. 2 times negative 4 is minus 8. Minus 24 equals 0. 32 minus 8 is 24. And 24 minus 24 is 0. So it actually works. So that's why D is your answer. Okay, now problem 33. It says, what is the only positive solution for the equation 2x squared minus 7x minus 30? Okay, so now with 33, again, this is another substitution problem. So what you could do, you can either substitute in these values for the x value and see if they give you 0, or you could factor this and then solve for the solution. Now, I would say this. Because we're just starting this out, I would just say go ahead and just substitute until you get what the answer being 0 is. So I would tell you it would be B for problem 33, which would be 6. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take B and I'm going to substitute in 6. So we have 2 times 6 squared minus 7 times 6 minus 30 equals 0. 6 squared is 36. So now, 2 times 36 is 72. Negative 7 times 6 will give us a minus 42 minus 30. 72 minus 42. 72 minus 42 is 30. Minus 30 is 0. 30 minus 30 is 0. So that is why 6 works, and that is your final answer. Now for 34, it says the area of a rectangle is found by multiplying the length by the width. In the rectangle below, the area of the rectangle is equal to the expression 2x squared minus 27x plus 70. And they give you one of the sides. Now remember, what's nice about this is, if you know the area formula of a rectangle, area is equal to length times width. That is the area formula. So what they're telling you here is, you're going to take this 2x minus 7 side and multiply it by whatever this side would be, and it should give you this here. So now, I am going to help you a little bit, because this was a slick way of them trying to get you to factor. Now, since this is multiple choice, because you're going to get a lot of practice factoring anyway, since this is multiple choice, what I would do is this here, and this is just me. I would look at the answers that are available and then determine which one is your answer. Because remember, when you multiply this last value by the last value here, it must give you a positive 70. So this is negative 7 times positive 10. We know that's going to be a negative 70. So A doesn't work. We have a negative 7 times a negative 10, which is positive 70. So we know B is a potential. Then we go to C. Negative 7 times positive 10 is negative 70. So we know that doesn't work. But negative 7 times negative 10 is positive 70. So we know D is a potential. So now we got B and D. Now I will tell you the answer is going to be B, but we're going to multiply so you can see how it is B. So this is problem 34. So we'll take B's answer, which is x minus 10, and we're going to multiply by 2x minus 7. So now, we multiply this. We would have the FOIL method, the front, which is x times 2x, times the outer, plus x times negative 7, and then the inner, which would be negative 10 times 2x, and then the last, which is negative 10 times negative 7. So now we multiply. X times 2x is 2x squared. X times negative 7 is a negative 7x. Negative 10 times 2x is a negative 20x. And negative 10 times negative 7 is a positive 70. Now, we combine like terms. We have 2x squared. Negative 7x minus 20x is a negative 27x. And then plus 70. And we know that is what we started off with as far as what we were supposed to solve for. So we have this, and that is why it's B. Now, you could have factored this out, and it would have told you what the other parenthesis was. Or you could have went through and multiplied all of them until you got this 2x squared minus 27x plus 70. But the choice is yours. Have a wonderful day, and I will post this to YouTube.